There are 23 Catholic churches, not 23 denominations, not 23 branches of Christianity, 23 distinct, fully Catholic churches, all in full communion with the Pope in Rome, all celebrating valid sacraments, all teaching the same core doctrine, and most Catholics have never heard of 22 of them. You know the Roman Catholic Church, the Latin Mass, the Vatican, the Pope in white vestments standing at the window of St. Peter's Basilica. But there is also the Maronite Catholic Church based in Lebanon, using an ancient Aramaic liturgy, the same language Jesus spoke, in a liturgical tradition so old it predates the Great Schism by centuries. The Coptic Catholic Church, an Egyptian tradition with roots in the earliest days of Christianity, using a liturgy descended directly from the Church of Alexandria, where Clement and Origen and Athanasius taught. The Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church Byzantine, in its liturgy, its theology, its iconography, its entire aesthetic, but Catholic, fully, formally, papally Catholic. The Syro-Malabar Catholic Church in India, tracing its origin to the Apostle Thomas himself, who, according to tradition, arrived in India in 52 CE. The oldest Christian community in Asia, now in full communion with Rome. These churches use different languages, different liturgical rites, different theological emphases, different canon law, different approaches to clerical celibacy. Married priests are permitted in most of them, and different spiritual traditions that predate the Roman Church's dominance by centuries. They are all Catholic, and almost nobody outside their own communities knows they exist. Today we go through the full picture, what the Eastern Catholic churches are, where they came from, why they exist in this strange middle position between Rome and Constantinople, and what their existence reveals about the nature of Catholicism that the Roman-centric view almost entirely conceals. One church, two lungs, the theory and the reality. Pope John Paul II described the Catholic Church as breathing with two lungs, the Latin West and the Greek East. It is a beautiful image. It is also, in important ways, an idealization of a history that has been significantly more complicated than harmonious respiration. To understand the Eastern Catholic churches, you need to understand three things simultaneously: the original unity of Christianity, the Great Schism that divided it, and the subsequent history of partial reunions that created the current situation. The original diversity. In the first centuries of Christianity, the Church was not liturgically or administratively uniform. Different regions developed their own theological emphases, their own liturgical styles, their own church governance. The five great centers of early Christianity, Rome, Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem, were called patriarchates, each presided over by a patriarch of equal dignity. These five together were understood to govern the whole church collegially. Each patriarchate developed its own rite, a complete liturgical tradition, including prayers, rituals, music, calendar, and theological sensibility. These rites were not merely different ways of celebrating the same Mass. They were distinct expressions of Christian faith, shaped by different languages, different philosophical traditions, different cultural contexts. The Alexandrian Rite was shaped by Egyptian culture and Coptic language. The Antiochian Rite was shaped by Syriac culture and Aramaic language. The Byzantine Rite was shaped by Greek culture and Greek philosophy. The Latin Rite was shaped by Roman administrative culture and Latin language. These were not competing versions of Christianity. They were the natural diversity of a faith, spreading simultaneously through multiple cultures with their own deep intellectual traditions. The Schism and its aftermath. The Great Schism of 1054 divided the Western Latin Church from the Eastern Byzantine Church. We covered this in the Orthodox versus Catholic versus Protestant video. What that video did not cover is what happened to the Eastern Christian communities that were not part of the Byzantine orbit, the Coptic Church in Egypt, the Syriac Church in Antioch and Mesopotamia, the Armenian Church, the Ethiopian Church, the Indian Thomas Christians, These communities had their own ancient traditions, their own theological positions, some of which had separated from the main body of Christianity even earlier than 1054, at the Council of Chalcedon in 451 CE. And over the following centuries, some portions of these communities entered into communion with Rome while maintaining their own liturgical rites, their own theological traditions, and in many cases, their own patriarchs. This is how the Eastern Catholic churches were born, not as Roman Catholics who adopted Eastern customs, but as Eastern Christians who entered communion with Rome while keeping everything that made them Eastern. The Byzantine Catholics orthodox in everything but allegiance. The largest group of Eastern Catholic churches share the Byzantine Rite, the same liturgical tradition used by the Eastern Orthodox churches. If you walked into a Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church and an Eastern Orthodox church on the same Sunday morning, you would struggle to tell them apart. The same iconostasis, the screen of icons separating the nave from the sanctuary, the same divine liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, sung in the same ancient form, the same theological language, the same spiritual tradition, the same visual aesthetic. The difference is invisible to the casual observer. The Byzantine Catholic churches are in full communion with Rome. The Orthodox churches are not. How did this happen? The primary mechanism was the Union of Brest in 1596, a union between a significant portion of the Orthodox hierarchy in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and the Catholic Church. The context was political as much as theological. Ukraine and Belarus at this period were part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, a Catholic-majority state. The Orthodox clergy in these territories found themselves under pressure politically, economically, and socially from the Catholic majority. A portion of the Orthodox bishops saw union with Rome as a solution. They would receive the same legal protections and social standing as Latin Catholic clergy while maintaining their Byzantine liturgical tradition. The Union of Brest was the result. The churches that entered union became the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church and the Belarusian Greek Catholic Church. The conditions of the union were explicit. They would keep the Byzantine Rite intact, keep their married priesthood, keep their theological tradition, and be governed by their own hierarchy in exchange for accepting papal primacy and the filioque. The complicated legacy. The Union of Brest is viewed very differently depending on who you ask. Catholic theology describes it as a reunion, a portion of separated brethren returning to full communion with the successor of Peter. Orthodox theology describes it as a betrayal bishops selling out their tradition for political advantage, creating a hybrid church that serves as a permanent obstacle to genuine Catholic Orthodox reunion because its very existence implies that Eastern Christians can and should become Catholic. Ukrainian Greek Catholics themselves, who suffered enormously under Soviet persecution, having their church forcibly liquidated in 1946 and their properties handed to the Russian Orthodox Church, describe it as the defining expression of their national and religious identity, a tradition worth dying for. All three descriptions are simultaneously true about the same historical event. The other Byzantine Catholic churches. The Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church is the largest, with approximately 4.5 million members, but the Byzantine Rite is shared by several other Eastern Catholic churches. The Melkite Greek Catholic Church based in Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and Palestine, with a significant diaspora, one of the most theologically sophisticated Eastern Catholic churches, often serving as a bridge in Catholic Orthodox dialogue. The Romanian Greek Catholic Church suppressed under communist Romania, its bishops martyred, its churches seized, now recovering. The Greek Catholic Church of Greece, itself tiny, historically marginal, theologically significant. Each of these churches represents a specific historical moment of reunion with Rome, and each carries the scars and the gifts of that history simultaneously. The Oriental Catholics, the Church's Rome, almost forgot. The Byzantine Catholic churches are the most visible Eastern Catholics in the Western world, but they are not the oldest, and they are not the most theologically distinct. The Oriental Catholic churches, a different category from the Byzantine ones, represent Christian traditions that separated from the mainstream even before the Great Schism of 1054. Their separation from Rome, in most cases, came at the Council of Chalcedon in 451 CE. The Chalcedonian definition that Christ is one person in two natures, fully human and fully divine, without mixture or confusion, was rejected by several major Christian communities. The Coptic Church in Egypt, the Ethiopian Church, the Armenian Church, the Syriac Church, these communities held a position called Miaphysitism, that Christ's human and divine natures were united into one nature after the Incarnation. The difference from Chalcedon is subtle in phrasing and enormous in its ecclesial consequences. These churches have been separated from both Rome and Constantinople for over 1,500 years. Over the centuries, portions of each of these communities entered into communion with Rome while maintaining their own ancient rites. The Coptic Catholic Church. Egypt's Christian tradition traces to the evangelist Mark, who, according to tradition, founded the Church of Alexandria in the 1st century CE. The Coptic liturgy, conducted in the ancient Coptic language, a direct descendant of the language of the pharaohs, with significant portions in Arabic, is among the most ancient Christian liturgies in existence. The Coptic Catholic Church, in communion with Rome since the 18th century, uses this same ancient liturgy. Its membership is small, roughly 200,000 in Egypt, existing alongside the much larger Coptic Orthodox Church of approximately 10 million. The Maronite Church. The Maronite Church is the anomaly in this entire story. It is the only Eastern Catholic Church that has never been separated from Rome, or at least that is the official Maronite claim, and it has significant historical support. The Maronites trace their origin to Saint Maron, a 4th century Syrian monk, and to the monastery he founded on the Orontes River. They have been in continuous communion with Rome since at least the 12th century during the Crusades, and claim this communion goes back much further. The Maronite Church is centered in Lebanon, where it is the largest Christian community and one of the defining forces in Lebanese political and cultural identity. Its liturgy is conducted in a mixture of Aramaic and Arabic. It maintains a married diaconate and has a distinct theological tradition, though it follows Latin canon law more closely than most other Eastern Catholic churches. When Pope John Paul II visited Lebanon in 1997, he met with Maronite Patriarch Nasrallah Boutros Sfeir and described the Maronite Church as the miraculous bridge between East and West. It is a description the Maronites have embraced entirely. The Syro-Malabar Church. India's Thomas Christians, the ancient Christian community that traces its origin to the Apostle Thomas's mission to India in 52 CE, represent one of the oldest continuous Christian communities, Earth. When Portuguese missionaries arrived in India in the 16th century, they encountered this ancient community, which had developed in relative isolation from Western Christianity for over a millennium. The encounter was not always respectful. The Portuguese attempted to Latinize the Thomas Christian tradition, replacing the ancient Syriac liturgy with Latin forms. The result of this pressure was multiple splits. One portion of the Thomas Christians entered full communion with Rome, becoming the Syro-Malabar Catholic Church and the Syro-Malankara Catholic Church. Others aligned with different Oriental traditions. Others became independent. The Syro-Malabar Church today has approximately 4 million members, making it one of the largest Eastern Catholic churches in the world and one of the least known outside India. What Eastern Catholics actually experience, the liturgical difference. Describing the Eastern Catholic churches in terms of history and ecclesiastical politics risks missing what actually makes them distinctive in daily practice. The difference is most visible and most viscerally felt in the liturgy. The Latin Mass versus the Divine Liturgy. The Roman Catholic Mass in its ordinary form is a liturgy that has undergone significant development and reform, most recently with the Second Vatican Council's liturgical reforms in the 1960s. It is conducted primarily in the vernacular language of the congregation. It is relatively brief, typically 45 to 60 minutes. It is celebrant-focused, with the congregation in a largely receptive posture. The Byzantine Divine Liturgy, used by Ukrainian Greek Catholics, Melkites, and others, is a different experience entirely. It is almost entirely sung, not hymns interspersed with spoken portions. The entire liturgy, including the prayers of the priest, is chanted. The congregation responds in chant. The deacon chants his invocations. Even the scripture readings are chanted in a specific tone. The liturgy lasts approximately 90 minutes on a normal Sunday, longer on feast days. The iconostasis, the screen of icons, stands between the congregation and the altar. During the most sacred moments, the royal doors in the center of the screen close. The congregation cannot see what is happening at the altar. This is not exclusion, it is the visual encoding of a theological principle. The most holy act is occurring in a space set apart. The theology of icons, which we touched on in the Orthodox versus Catholic versus Protestant video, permeates the entire liturgical experience. The church interior is covered in icons arranged in a specific theological program. The saints depicted are understood as genuinely present, the heavenly church participating in the earthly liturgy. The incense is constant. The priest incenses the altar, the icons, the clergy, the congregation. The entire church becomes a single sacred space, all of it hallowed. Married priests. One of the most practically significant differences between Eastern and Latin Catholicism is the question of clerical celibacy. The Latin Church requires celibacy of its priests as a matter of discipline, a rule that could theoretically be changed, though it has not been changed in the West since the 11th century. Most Eastern Catholic churches permit the ordination of married men to the priesthood. A man who is already married may be ordained a priest. A man who is ordained a priest may not subsequently marry. Bishops, however, are typically chosen from the celibate monastic clergy. This difference has created significant pastoral complications in the diaspora, particularly in North America, where Ukrainian Greek Catholic or Maronite priests with wives and children have sometimes been refused incardination into Latin dioceses, or placed under pressure to observe Latin celibacy requirements despite their own church's explicit permissions. These tensions have generated genuine conflict between Eastern Catholic communities and the Latin hierarchy conflict that reveals, beneath the official theology of unity and diversity, a persistent tendency toward Latin normativity that the Eastern churches experience as institutional pressure to become more Roman. The theological tensions unity and diversity, or pressure to conform. The official Catholic theology of the Eastern churches is elegant. The Second Vatican Council's decree, Orientalium Ecclesiarum on the Eastern Catholic churches, affirms their equal dignity with the Latin Church, their right to preserve and develop their own traditions, and the importance of their distinct witness for the full Catholicity of the Church. The lived reality has frequently been more complicated. The Latinization problem. Throughout the post-Reformation period, significant pressure was applied, sometimes overtly, sometimes subtly, on Eastern Catholic churches to conform to Latin practices. Latin-style vestments replaced traditional Eastern vestments. Latin devotions were introduced alongside or in place of Eastern ones. The Gregorian calendar was imposed on churches that used the Julian. Seminary training was conducted in Rome, in Latin, producing Eastern Catholic priests formed primarily in Western theological categories. The most extreme case was the abolition of the married priesthood in the American diaspora in the early 20th century. Eastern Catholic priests who immigrated to North America and brought their wives found themselves in conflict with the Latin hierarchy, which refused to accept married clergy. The result? Thousands of Eastern Catholics, particularly Ukrainian Greek Catholics, converted to Eastern Orthodoxy rather than accept the imposition of Latin celibacy requirements. This episode is perhaps the clearest example of the gap between official theology and institutional practice in the Eastern Catholic story. The ecumenical dimension. The Eastern Catholic Churches occupy an extraordinarily awkward position in Catholic Orthodox relations. For the Catholic Church, they are evidence that unity with Rome is possible without the abandonment of Eastern tradition, living proof that East and West can be reconciled. For the Orthodox churches, they are an obstacle to reconciliation communities created by historical pressure, political calculation, or the work of Catholic missionaries in Orthodox territory, whose existence implies that the Orthodox are incomplete Christians who should return to Rome. The Joint International Commission for Theological Dialogue between the Catholic and Orthodox churches has repeatedly addressed the status of the Eastern Catholic churches and has repeatedly failed to reach consensus. The Balaman Statement of 1993 described Uniatism, the creation of Eastern Catholic churches through reunion with Rome, as a method to be avoided in future ecumenism. Catholic representatives signed this statement while Eastern Catholics watched with alarm, feeling that their existence was being apologized for. What Eastern Catholics themselves say. The Eastern Catholic communities that have survived the most intense pressures, particularly the Ukrainian Greek Catholics, who maintain their church clandestinely through Soviet persecution, whose bishops went to the Gulag rather than merge with the Russian Orthodox Church, speak with great clarity about what their existence means. They are not a compromise. They are not a halfway house. They are a distinct expression of Catholic faith, shaped by a theological and spiritual tradition that Rome did not create and should not absorb. The question of whether Rome has fully accepted this, not just officially, but institutionally, in the daily practice of how Eastern Catholics are treated within the broader Catholic structure remains, depending on who you ask, either essentially resolved or fundamentally unresolved. 23 Catholic churches. Aramaic liturgies older than the Latin Mass. Byzantine iconostases and chanted divine liturgies. Coptic prayers descending directly from the Church of Alexandria. An Indian community tracing its foundation to an apostle who arrived before Rome had a bishop. All of them Catholic, all of them in communion with the Pope, all of them in the official theology, equal in dignity to the Latin Church, whose name most people use when they say the word Catholic. The Eastern Catholic churches are simultaneously one of the best-kept secrets in Christianity and one of the most important theological arguments Catholicism makes about itself. The argument is this: to be Catholic does not mean to be Roman. Catholicity, the word itself means universal, is not the universality of a single cultural form applied everywhere. It is the universality of a communion that contains genuine diversity, that breathes with more than one lung, that holds within itself traditions shaped by every civilization Christianity has ever touched. Whether the Roman Church has fully lived up to this argument, whether the institutional pressures of Latinization, the ecumenical awkwardness of Uniatism, the persistent tendency to treat the Eastern churches as interesting, but secondary, whether all of this has been adequately addressed, or whether it represents an ongoing failure to implement the theology the Church officially professes. That question does not have a clean answer. What does have a clean answer is this: the next time someone tells you what Catholics believe, ask them which Catholics they mean. The answer is more complicated and more interesting than almost anyone realizes.